And welcome to another edition of the GoDaddy Pro Meetup. Today we are blessed with James Tryon and his presence. He comes to us from both LearnDash and he runs his own agency. So he is people like all of us. And with that, I am going to let James introduce himself a little bit more in depth and take it from here. I'll be back on for Q&A at the end, James.
Awesome. Thanks, Sandy. Hi, everyone. My name is James Tryon, and to give a little bit of background about me, I have been using WordPress since 2007, and I have been in the e-learning space since 2009. I'm the founder of Easily Amuse. It's a local agency, and we do things like Wapoo's, Honors WP, and a couple other brands we help run. And like Sandy said, I'm also the training specialist at LearnDash. I help run their webinars and help manage their Facebook group. And you can find me inside the LearnDash Facebook group or on Twitter at James Tryon. Today we're going to be talking about delivering a successful LMS project. I got a couple disclaimers. Like I said, I work for LearnDash part-time and with LearnDash, but nothing that I'm talking about today is specifically LearnDash, and everything that I'm doing is, if I've talked about it, it's from my own opinion, from things that I bought myself. There isn't actually any affiliate links or anything like that. It's actually services or things that I use. In today's conversation, things like how much work to expect, how to plan your project, what kind of features your end user might need, options on selling your courses, and what to do if you are replacing an in-person classroom. A lot of these things we're going to cover broadly. I don't know if we're going to actually answer like this is X amount of how much you should charge. I think today's conversation is really about what type of features you might need and what to expect when building your project to help look out for the gotchas to make sure that you're properly prepared and ready for a larger project itself or a simpler project. So how much work to expect when building an LMS? Well, there's a hint, more than expected for sure. Now, a project could take as little as a week or a couple hours actually, or it could take months depending on what you're actually trying to accomplish and what the end user's goals are. If we're talking specifically about LearnDash, I know that you can be up and running in under an hour if you're going to use as like a starting template and import our course content as a starting point. Like we have several demos that you can get up and running in a matter of hours, and it's going to take longer to edit and replace the copy. But on the return side, if you really did need something completely custom, fancy, you have the full 9 yards of a forum and e-commerce solution with gamification and some type of membership area with maybe multilingual, well, then you're easily looking at months worth of work. And we'll talk about that and helping set those expectations. So how is an LMS different than other projects? What I like to think of is LMS isn't really different than other projects. It's sort of, you take all your other projects and you put it into one, and then that's your LMS project. When you think learning management system, you think that's actually, oh, I can go in and I can sign up and take a course and I can do an online class or get a certificate in something. But besides the actual course, you have to worry about, well, how are you selling that? How are you going to market those courses? You also have the entire side of like the resource, the blog side of just running an entire site and business on top of your actual courses. So the LMS is such a small portion of what you're actually trying to do. And it has a lot of complex moving pieces at once. For example, a basic LMS has a registration system, an e-commerce system, some type of notification system back and forth. Whether that just be the default WordPress or not, you still have to look out for making sure your system is sending. Just so everyone knows too, we do have a chat, so feel free to ask questions if anything comes up, and we'll definitely try to save room at the end for any questions that I don't get to. And a couple other small things here that you want to think about. An LMS project itself, you might not have a lot of traffic, but that traffic might all be at the same time. You might have simultaneous users. Let's say you're taking an online class and you have a class of 30 and they have to show up at noon every day to take that class. Well, that's 30 users logged into a system at one time versus a one-off user or something that can be cached. And unfortunately, we don't recommend caching the LMS portions of your website, regardless of LMS you're using, because that content is something that you're having real-time reports on, progress. Things have to be refreshed in real time. So that makes it very difficult to cache certain areas. So you want to really be considerate of what you actually are building besides the actual course part. So here's a couple examples that you might want to consider when you're actually building an LMS. Like, what type of courses, how many courses, are you selling those courses in groups or individual? Do you need an e-commerce platform? And we'll talk about more of these questions a little bit later, but the actual, do you actually need an e-commerce platform or is it built-in purchasing system in the LMS that you chose? Is that good enough? Do you need supporting forums for your students to interact with? And do you need a social layer? Maybe you need more interaction. Maybe you need a way for students to interact with each other, almost like well, I hate to use the example, but like Facebook. If you needed some type of social layer, you might need to add that on top of your site. And now you're talking a pretty heavy system for something that you thought started out as just, oh, it'll be some quick little courses and we'll award people a certification, or they need to do their 30 minutes worth of training each month to make sure that our staff stays certified. So we'll talk about that as we go. So what really goes into delivering a successful project for your clients? Well, I think it's just shared understanding. As long as you understand what we're really trying to deliver and what the client needs, I think from that point on, it's just trying to make sure you get there together with and crossing off your list as you go. So let me take a step back. One example that I have is a music teacher. Let's say that you're trying to help out a music teacher and they were giving single lessons before COVID happened. So when they first started, they could be using their LMS as a tool to give their students extra learning homework. They can log in, they can see what they're doing on a daily basis, and extra work. It's work at their own pace. It's just in between supporting content. Well, let's say that same instructor is now no longer allowed to meet in person. So now they had to take their basic LMS, which was nothing before besides the LMS in a default WordPress situation, and now they need to offer some type of booking setup because they need to be able to schedule their one-on-one music lessons. So you would then take your basic LMS course that was probably working just fine for them before, and now you have to add this extra layer of e-commerce to allow for a booking plugin to be installed. But the beauty of most LMSs is they are designed to work in your environment. They're meant to be added onto your WordPress site. So it can work by themselves, or it can work with easy digital downloads or WooCommerce. It just is going to work right out of the box usually, or with an add-on plugin that allows you to sell individual things. So you're going to want to install a booking plugin in this situation, and now your music teacher can now offer one-on-one courses that now extended their basic environment from the beginning. And they were able to evolve their site as they went. They didn't have to do it all at once. And because of the way the rules and laws changed, they were able to take something that they own themselves, because working with WordPress, we all know we get the freedom of owning our own content, and we get to add extra features on top of that and extend it to our needs as budgets see fit and as our clients need things. So the beauty of something like an LMS based on WordPress is you can easily add, start with a bare minimum and work up to what you actually need. So while we're talking about that, and I did talk about, we talk about what to actually expect. So a quick example of, I just need the WordPress site up. I want to be able to add some lessons. where I can assign someone a user, they can log in and take the courses. I think anyone would be able to do that without a custom design in an afternoon. So that's a pretty simple task to do with a basic LMS if you didn't need an additional e-commerce solution. If you did need an additional e-commerce solution, you can still do that pretty quickly depending on your needs, but it starts to change as you get fancier requests or need to add built-in tailored solutions. But where to start? Yeah, it can be pretty daunting. So a couple of things here, especially when you're getting started in the LMS space and you've never worked directly with an LMS. And I think all of us here, if you've used WordPress, you have the ability and skills to do that. But there's a lot of gotchas depending on which platform you pick and choose. And I'm not here to say which one is the best or even which ones I would use, because even though I work part-time with LearnDash, I actually use more than one LMS on my day-to-day. Just to make sure I can see and know how they actually work. But I actually sell them through, sell courses that I help run through WooCommerce and Easy Digital Downloads and directly through LearnDash. So I try to stay on top of
they're all just as
good. I mean, to be fair, there's always going to be use cases for different situations, but I would not get hung up so much on which version or what plugin you're using, and more worry about the goals and the end user and what your client is trying to accomplish. And I would always worry about that end user first, and then worry about how I would properly tackle that feature and figure out from there what's the most important step, or do we have to custom build something, or do we have to add a plugin for this? Or is that feature really that needed? Could we get around it by doing X, Y, and Z, which gets us close enough without spending thousands? So let me review my notes real quick. Now, as I was starting to say, when you're selling an LMS project and you've not actually sold one before, you want to be real careful of what it costs. And how I would go about working with that is if I didn't know the full cost and breakdown of the project and the client doesn't really know themselves, I would start with a discovery audit. I would sell that first, and then I would get a full understanding. And at that point, the client and you would both know exactly what you're trying to deliver. And then once that's finished, you can then choose to continue on with the development process, allow them to work on it their own, or maybe they need to raise some more funds and they'll come back to you. Or maybe it's doable and you guys can start and you have a great game plan moving forward, or your team has a great game plan moving forward. So I would highly recommend trying to sell a discovery audit if you're still not sure or if there's a lot of fuzziness there. Now, I'm not here to tell anyone how to run their business or what to charge or any of that, or even how to charge. But I will go over a little bit of how we work. And we work on a loose, agile process, which means we charge tasks for time and we plan things, and things are prepaid mostly. And we try to gather what's the most important feature requests from the client. We try to break those down based on our understanding of what all those tasks take based off our past experiences. And then we give a quote based off of sprints, and we run a sprint every week to 2 weeks, depending on what their process is. And we'll quote the work in sprints. And the client themselves has the ability to say yes or no on what we're working on based on the order of priority we set at the beginning of that project. And as we evolve and as clients ask for things, or if as we discover unknowns, the project might change and shift. And working Agile allows us to change and pivot a little and still going after those end goals, but based on what we learned, and we're not necessarily locked in like a waterfall approach, but we do try to find as much of that information out as possible up front. So we try to mimic a waterfall, but be a little bit more agile, as it states. So that's how we try to work. and allowing that clear expectation up front and telling the client, this is what we think it's going to take. This is what we currently know. And based off what we currently know, we think it's going to take X amount of time. Now, you're not going to get super rich, and obviously that's not a value add pricing model, but it's an honest day's work for doing a fair amount of stuff. And you know exactly what you're doing and how much you have to do. Now, there's better ways of doing it, but I find that with larger projects like this and the amount of work that it takes, I find this to be a decent approach just because of all the unknowns that happen to pop up with a larger learning management system. Okay, so where to start? I'm assuming this is I would review the RFP as many times as I can. I would request a pre-sale call. I would ask tons of questions in the call. I would, try to figure out as much as possible. That call would probably last about an hour. I would have a couple people on my team on that pre-sale call just to make sure we all understood what was going on. We would try to get a clear understanding of what the key features are from the client and what they're trying to accomplish. We would review all the nice to haves. If budget wasn't an issue, or like sometimes you would be surprised on what a nice to have is. I was talking with someone last week. They wanted to change LMS because they wanted to be able to share something socially. We're like, well, you can add a social share plugin. Like, you don't have to do this entire move or migration. We can find a solution. So figure out what their pain points are during this. Now, this, like I said, this meeting is really only about an hour, and it's a pre-sales meeting. If you're doing too much more than this, I would really sell that discovery audit to make sure you have a clear understanding. This should really be like, yes, I do need a forum, or yes, we do want a way for our instructors to interact with our students directly. These are just conversation points so you can do your research and prepare a proper quote. You're going to review what's wrong with their current system. Maybe they're brand new, maybe they don't have a system, or maybe they're leaving a third party or a locked-in gated LMS, and they're looking to move over to WordPress. And definitely find out what their goals are. This is a top-level phone call, and you're trying to fix all their problems for them during this phone call. You're not going to fix their problems. You want them to know you could fix their problems. You want to hear about them, and this is sort of a brainstorming and feel-good conversation on what we can do to figure out how to make the best possible project for you. And this is, try not to quote on the call. You don't want to get locked into anything. Again, I'm not trying to sell you how to do your business. I'm just saying this is a discovery call to figure out what things actually take. If you're comfortable with pricing and you think you know what it takes in that call, then by all means, save yourself the time, write in a large proposal, and try to close the deal. But that's not what this conversation is. This is just make sure you know what you're trying to accomplish. And once you have a good idea, a ballpark figure, and you feel you can safely close, the deal, well, then go for it. Set up a proposal, and then close the deal. And at that point, you can actually start your official discovery and onboarding. To me, this is one of my favorite parts of a call. Of a project. You get to take all that nice to have and feel good stuff that you talked about during the sales call. And now you get to start actually breaking it down and figuring out what it's going to take to build that. Now, in theory, you've already sort of estimated those numbers. And now you're going to create tickets. You're going to create backlog items. You're going to get approval. You're going to take that project that you set up, that you told the client, oh, it's going to be a sprint, or, oh, it's going to be 20 sprints. We're starting here. And you're going to start with that research and discovery phase, that first sprint. And you're going to take that and build out all this stuff. Now we're getting ready to go over all the stuff that I'm talking about, but I just wanted to let everyone know that that when I plan a project, I consider the discovery and onboarding phase, the project management, all of that stuff, at least 25% of the project. That goes into ticket creation, that goes into back and forth emails, meetings, time for the team to understand stuff. And also, whenever I do have a meeting with a client that's talking about features and the rest of my team can't be there, and even if my team can be there, I try to record that meeting It allows me to take notes during the call, but I don't have to be precise with my notes, and I can review the call to make sure that I didn't miss anything. I usually save that directly from Zoom into Dropbox on export. It gets uploaded to the cloud. And then I take that link and add it to Asana so everyone in the meeting has access to it. And I also make sure everyone knows the meeting is being recorded when I start. This is a message from the Facebook group. Is there a guide or a checklist to follow to build a great academy with my LearnDash LMS? I think I'm missing something. And Dave, which is one of our top contributors to the Facebook group, was making a joke about how all the different ways. He's like, there are more than 47,894 different ways to do this, and I think his number might be a little exaggerated, but it's up there. Like you can install it. You can sell LearnDash through memberships. You can sell gated access and give away free access to your courses. You can sell them through multiple gateways. You can sell them directly or with LearnDash, or you could, the sky's the limit. If you can sell something in LearnDash, I mean, in WordPress, you can probably tie a LearnDash or other LMS course to it. And how do you set that up? Again, that's really up to you and your goals and what the client is trying to accomplish. And that's where that discovery time and you coming in as a consultant really helps in trying to figure out what their goals are. And we'll go over some of those. The goals themselves are going to be a little bit more like technical, but I would like you guys to, everyone to extrapolate that up and think about what they might mean. For an example, something like adding a BuddyPress forum to your site, you might think is doable, but a BuddyPress forum itself can be pretty clunky, and it's going to require a lot of styling to match or mimic the rest of your theme design. And if anyone has found a BBPress, Elementor, or Gutenberg add-ons, I would love to use those because I'm still styling forums by hand with CSS. So when you think about that, oh, I'm just going to add a forum to my site, and you're done in a couple of days with the rest of your design, but now you're stuck with this ugly-looking thing that you have to make match the rest of your design and experience and make sure all that communication matches and it's a cohesive thing for your students. You know, that time quickly adds up. Again, not trying to tell you how to run your business, but I know if I'm trying to design a view, I think a single view is at least an 8-hour task for me to think about the goals, the wireframe structure, what the possible content is, making those tickets, defining that. Even if it's a simple view, you know, that adds up. A forum itself, you have the forum, you have a topic, you have the post itself, you have the threaded comments. You're looking at 4 views plus at least 2 emails that go along with that on top of a profile page. So we're looking at 5 views. So not that a forum is a difficult ask, but if you're doing it blindly and you don't know what all the features are, a forum can be an easy 40-hour project added to your LMS. So just something to keep in mind that every little feature, even though it might be small and very powerful, will start to add up. And if you want that cohesive user experience, it's going to take a little bit more than just turning it on. Okay, during your discovery call, this is like, you had your first call, which is your like sales call pitch, making sure you understand the nice to have to get a good quote, an idea of what something might cost. But your discovery call itself, this is going to be, I would say a little bit more direct, long. This call is usually 2 to 4 hours or over the 2 days, 2 hours each. And this time is as much time as the client needs, as many questions as we might have. Some awkward conversations might come up. This is a time where you might talk strategy, what their goals are, what they're planning on doing, how they're planning on recouping their investment, how they're planning on marketing all this stuff once it gets up and running. That's also another thing too. Like, where do you draw the line? Are you coming in as a full consultant? Are you coming in just to build something quick? Are you coming in to like eliminate all their pain points and team up and try to figure that out? Now, I'm not recommending that anyone be a catch-all and try to handle all aspects of every project. You'll go crazy and you won't get any sleep. But I do recommend trying to at least bring up those questions as much as possible to make sure that your client understands what's happening and what they can start prepping for as they move forward. Okay, I have like probably 3 or 4 slides next of just some random questions that you want to think about. And now, this is why I said that I can't give you an exact answer on what it costs to build an LMS, because every one of these questions could add days worth of work to the project. So these are things that you would want to ask your clients. These are not in any particular order. They're just as I was thinking about them, and I added them to the slides. So are they looking for like a quick and easy setup, or they want something more advanced with more control over the user experience? Like I said, you can have LearnDash up and running in a couple hours. You use the starter templates through Astra. You can install a demo site, and it's going to take you longer to update your own copy than it did to be up and running. So you could be up and running pretty quickly, or as we stated with all the other things, if you needed a custom e-commerce experience, user funnels, forums tied to courses, that's all going to take extra time to set up, and you want to accommodate that. Even if each individual task itself is an easy task, there's a lot of easy tasks that you need to account for. Do you need live courses? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. And are you planning on selling supporting collateral like books, or do you need to sell anything? Do you need to track inventory? So for the longest time, if you needed to sell anything tangible, I would say, oh, you should with
WooCommerce.
but over the past year, Easy Digital Downloads now allows you to actually sell physical goods, which is with one of their third-party extensions. So I think Easy Digital Downloads is a great solution. I also sell a lot with WooCommerce. So if you already have an EDD store set up, you can very easily track books now. Now, it does not track inventory, so if you still need to track inventory, I would recommend sticking with WooCommerce for now. And then any type of user interactions that you might need, like do your users need to interact with the students, other students? Do your users need to interact with the teachers? Hey, Beth, do you need to limit the comments in any way? So like it's only one-sided, how much of that do you actually need? Do you need some type of live chat feature? And all these things exist. You just need to figure out what you might need from your clients, and then find the solutions or figure out what you can do and work backwards. There's always the possibility of building something custom if you need it, but you probably won't in most cases if you have a clear understanding what the goals are and kind of work within those means, and then use the custom option if you need to for something like this. And I only say that because the e-learning industry is, I think it's set by 2027, I believe it's set to be about $27 billion a year, or some kind of crazy number like that. So yeah, the e-learning industry is growing by leaps and bounds, and there's a lot of other people already out there doing things. So I would use your time more as a consultant, finding the tools that fit the needs that you're trying to accomplish, and try to work in that, or find a gap that's missing, and then build the missing thing, and then get on board. But I would try to avoid making full custom things just because there's so much and so many moving pieces. Also wondering what the client's learning management experience is. I find a lot of times that just the process of teaching someone WordPress can be a tad daunting at times, or even WooCommerce themselves. Like these things that we take for granted can be pretty powerful and a little overwhelming if you haven't used them for the past 10 years. So I find that a lot of hands-on training, video recording training, try to be as patient as possible and accommodating for your users, and account for that training time, because they're going to need it. And regardless of what system you use, if they're not used to something like WordPress, and even with the changing interface of Gutenberg and all the new full site editing, it's best to pad in some time for patience when it comes to working with them. Now, this is not this definitely isn't LearnDash specific. This is any project itself, and you also need to understand who your audience is and who your user's audience is. Now, that can be tricky because let's say they're teaching minors, or you have problems with like advertising when it comes to that, or you have problems with like online classes and things of that nature with public schools, and we saw a lot of that over the last year, with public Zoom links, for instance. So you have to be careful with that type of thing. You also want to know your audience, because we did a pretty large LMS multi-site, multilingual project last year, and their target market was third-party countries with limited all mobile experience, with minimal as possible, and it needed to load as fast as possible because we're talking almost dial-up speed on mobile devices. You get that hinders a lot of your decision-making processes, what you can use, how many different add-ons you can use, what you're trying to accomplish, because that little plugin that you wanted to add to accomplish that one little thing now is turned into this huge file size that you have to worry about downloading to someone's smartphone itself, like user planning using. And how is your user planning on selling their courses? Meaning, like we talked about this a couple times, like directly through directly through the LMS, through a membership site. Are they planning on selling it through e-commerce? And all that adds on. And I think one of these questions can easily add a day's worth of time to your budgeting as you're planning and building, anything for your customers. Well, and how much coding experience do you have? And you can do a tremendous amount without having to code anything, you or your users or anyone. But if it starts to get too complicated, you want to keep that in mind on who's going to be updating it, how often they have to. Is that going to fall back to you, the developer, or are they going to be able to use the system itself? Another thing to keep in mind is, does someone want to sell on one site and give access to courses on an additional site? And that's all doable with plugins. But you're looking at probably an additional half day's worth of work to integrate a plugin like that. And then when you have to start setting up an entirely different sub-site, now you have like pages you didn't have to worry about, like an additional homepage. Other pages you have to think that are now just mimicked over because you have that, and now you have to design that. So the simplicity of adding a multi-site to separate your courses and your content from your actual main brochure site is great. But all the work that comes along with that and designing a sub-site, even if you can use maybe the original theme and set up a new child theme, that simple task, you can see how it's easily turned into another week's worth of work. So I would be, just be conscious of what your needs are, and I would make a checklist of during all the meetings of what you're trying to do and accomplish, because all these things do add up quickly. Do you plan on using any type of videos for your course? If so, where are you hosting that? We'll talk a little bit about that later. Do you plan on utilizing any certifications? Do you plan on your members interacting with each other? Like I said earlier, like BuddyPress. If we needed to install some type of social layer, BuddyPress is great. If you're going to go with LearnDash, there's a fork of BuddyPress called BuddyBoss, which is a really nice platform, but it's super server intensive. So it's going to use a lot of resources, but you could have Facebook in a box tied to all your courses, and students can interact if you really needed something like that. And it's beautiful, and it works pretty quickly out of the box, but very server intensive. So it's not something I would recommend to everyone, but if it's something your customers need, it's definitely there. Will you be selling your courses in groups? Or are you going to be selling access to your content with groups? Groups are just grouped content, or you can sell it like membership to your site with groups of content. And are you selling individual courses or multiple courses? Sometimes we have people, they just sell one course at a time, and it's like every 3 months they're selling one class, and they sell limited seats, and it's just sign up and buy now, and the course starts in 90 days, and then they run that course, and they just do 3 or 4 of those a year. And sometimes people will sell courses where they have go at your own pace courses, and they sell many of them. And again, we talked about the inventory, and if you needed something like that, selling physical goods, books, you would need to be able to add some type of third-party e-commerce solution, which would then take a couple extra days. So just remember, there's always something that can pop up that can give you a couple of little extra days. So each of these things here, the last page of questions, and then we'll move on to a little bit more fun stuff. Again, forums could easily take a couple days. Multilingual. Are you recreating the content? Are you setting up different individual sites? Are you responsible of translating the copy, or is your client translating the copy? And now that you have multilingual, or if you're selling multilingual, do you also have to support right to left, left to right text? Again, a physical goods thing again. Are you using taxes? Sometimes different states, provinces, European countries, they'll actually make you pay taxes on services or downloadable goods, unlike, at least here in Florida, where as long as it's a service, I don't, or downloadable good, like there isn't a tax on it currently. So again, I'm not an accountant, but if tax is a thing, that's something you need to account for. If your client has to worry about a VAT tax or something, that's something you need to take account for. Like membership layer, we talked about this a little bit, but there's probably 5 or 6 fantastic membership tools that would integrate in with most LMSs. And it really depends on if you need that or not. Social layer, gamification, newsletter integration, selling one of your sites, but on a sub-site. We talked about that. Anyways, these couple of
They got me once or twice. So I loaded them on purpose.
Because I wanted to just bring them up for everyone's attention. Something like a bulk user import. I didn't think about that at first. I built a big site. I built a multi-site for a client, and they needed a way to move users around. Now, it's just WordPress users, but we still needed a way to do that. And because of that, we ran into some limitations. We had to look into some different tools. And it was one of those things that we got to the last minute delivering the project, and the client's like, all the one subsite to the other subsite. And at the 11th hour, when you're getting ready to launch, that was a gotcha point that we just forgot to overlook. Now, I won't overlook that again, but definitely something like that. The same thing with the course export and import. We had one of our customers that wrote their English site, and then they wanted to export that and import it and then translate that to French and Arabic and Chinese. Well, that was great, and we were able to import and export, but we weren't able to import and export everything connected. We were able to get a good export from WordPress, but that got us a little bit. So we weren't prepared. Now there is tools, and we were able to write something that turned into a little bit of custom work. There's now a plugin available to help with that, but something like that got me. That got me a good 2 days worth of time. It was unexpected, 16 hours worth of work gone. Launched, unfortunately, I kind of ate that. And if I was a little bit careful, I would have been more aware of they needed to be able to move and migrate copy from one subsite to another. And that got me. That won't get me again, but it got me. Same thing with page builders versus Gutenberg. Over the past year, I've really been trying to build on Gutenberg more due to the lightweightness, built-in support, just trying to embrace it more. And that has been a slight learning curve for sure. The lack of support, trying not to install a bunch of other supporting plugins. I love Gutenberg, but it has been a learning experience for me. So from going from an Elementor experience to Gutenberg, Gutenberg slowed me down a lot. Now, I do think it created a better user experience at the end and a lightweight platform, especially for the mobile-first experience I was talking about earlier, but that was not expected. I think doing an entire 30-page site with subsites on Gutenberg probably cost me an extra 2-3 weeks of unplanned time about a year ago. I think it would go much faster now, but it definitely was a lot now, considering all those views. Okay, project management. We've completed the onboarding call with the client. We've had 1 or 2, probably close to 4 hours worth of conversation, recorded meetings. You've taken all those notes. Now it's time to break all that down into an Asana or a project management system somewhere. I personally use Asana. I break the project down into 1 to 3 projects. One might be an information board. One might be a support / knowledge base board, where as we build things and create info on how to use the system, we keep making articles there, and that's where our notes might go. And then the third one is the actual tangible, movable task that we're working on. And it's not unlikely that that a project management breakdown will take me 40 hours for an entire sprint worth of time after that onboarding call, and that would easily turn into 100 to 200 tickets. Now, all those tickets can be changed and modified. They're set up to where some are approved, a lot of the nice to haves are backlogged, and then it's up to the client to go in during our weekly meetings and stand-up meetings and weekly check-ins and bi-weekly Scrum check-ins to make sure that we're on task and nothing has changed and everything that we're currently approved and working on is still approved and working on. But it's a tremendous amount of work, and I think for the first couple of years of my career, we were giving that time away. We were just doing it. And I will never, ever do that again. So, yeah, all of our project management time is now billed for because it is very valuable. And in fact, I think it's one of the most valuable aspects of the project, because without that, you don't have a clear roadmap, and it helps define everything else. Everything is built on top of that itself. So things that need defining. So everything that we're talking about now over the next couple that
onboarding process,
things that you want to define during the onboarding call, during your research and discovery phase. Someone asked in the group, do I charge different rates? I personally, that's tricky. The direct answer is no, but I probably do. Like, to be honest, I don't think I really charge for project management time enough. Like, so I'll sell a sprint for 40 hours of development and 10 hours of project management time. And that 10 hours of project management time doesn't really get tracked. I know that I have budget for project management time in each sprint. And I find that I don't want to worry about the amount of communication if it's worth it or valuable. If that communication becomes overwhelming or too much, or the client is taking advantage, then I start to actually track. And I do track the development time for sure. I don't necessarily track the 10 hours. I know that it's sort of like this 10 hours is devoted to project management time. Now, if I happen to do 15 hours of project management time or 8 hours of project management time, I'm not really tracking that part. I am tracking the development time. And that just helped me from a peace of mind, honestly. Like, I got tired of stressing about it or trying to justify all of it. I was just like, nope, this is what we're doing. And it was a much easier change. So the things you want to think about is user account types. So you have your basic WordPress admin, or you have your subscriber or WordPress customer. But if you have different account types, you can make WordPress gives you the ability to make unlimited account types. So a lot of times we'll add an instructor role or a TA role or something like that, where they're sometimes we'll add an alumni role where someone is a retired teacher or an advisor. And they're just a different layer on top of the user table already. And that allows us to track and manipulate those users throughout the website. Also allowing us to tag things differently, which is nice. And it also if you have a clear understanding what your user types are, it allows you to set up proper user flows better and understand what the requirements might be. So now that you added a teacher or an instructor role, well, now you probably want to add an instructor single page, and you probably want to add a view all your instructors page so you can browse your teachers and things like that. So you also want to mark down all your marketing goals. Again, you want to know where your line is. You're not necessarily coming in to be a marketing hero if you're building it, but you can, depending on, I'm not trying to tell you any of that. But you do want to know what newsletter system are you using? How often are we integrating in? Are there different triggers or events that add tags or maybe help fix your abandoned cart ratio or something like that? So as much as marketing is important, you also want to think about the technical side of marketing and how that ties to what you're building. and how to accommodate for that moving forward. And I try not to get overwhelmed here, but really, newsletter, if you're just starting out, you want to figure out who your newsletter subscriber is going to be, and if you're using any type of goals or event tracking that you need to start configuring as you add links. Sitemap, this is going to help you define all your missing pages. Sitemap, so if you're using LearnDash, LearnDash itself is meant to be pretty agnostic, and you can use and leverage it however you want. That also means you have to do a lot of the setup yourself. So by default, there isn't really a sign-up link because LearnDash uses the default WordPress sign-up. So if you're using something like LearnDash, you probably want to add a custom sign-up page, a view all your courses page, a My Accounts page, the ability to edit your profile on the front end. If you're selling with WooCommerce, you probably want to add a cart page and a checkout page. Now, all those are just handled with shortcodes, but they're not just automatically generated or turned on. Sometimes, depending on if you use an importer, they might be created, but if you're going from scratch, building it yourself, these pages aren't always there, and they do need to be created, and they do need to add the shortcodes added to them. Just something to keep in mind. And I know we're running out of time, so let me speed it up a little bit. You also want to worry about user flows. Make sure you understand how the marketing integrates to that. And if you have time and budget, user stories and personas are great, but only if you have the budget. Student communication. You want to make sure that any of your emails are sending, the sign-up emails are sending. Things that you have to worry about are like sign-ups, forgot passwords, newsletters, form replies, comment replies, just your basic email communication through WordPress itself. You want to make sure those are all accounted for. And if your client wants them improved, how much time is that going to take to put a facelift on every one of those emails? Probably an easy 1 to 2 hours each. It's just something to think about. Some plugins, as I'm going through project management, I like to list any plugins that I think that are needed. I'm not trying to list any specific ones, but I always add something to help configure an SMTP, help block spam, and help set up for forms. Now, I will say, if you have open registration, spam is fixed by adding a CDN. Cloudflare is a free CDN. You can use that. That's going to eliminate most of your spam users. I actually started using Akismet and paying for that to help block the rest of the spam users on the sites that I have open registration for. It's worth it. I cuts down way down on all the spam emails. So it's definitely something I would recommend. It's not something I think I'd be doing years ago, saying you should buy Akismet, but yeah. And it lets you pay for what you want, so it's worth it for sure. Client responsibilities, content, course creation. They might need to revise their syllabus and material, make sure that it works and it has a pace for online learning. Assets like logos, branding, guidelines, stock images, teams, all that stuff. Things of your client's responsibility. Make sure they start doing that as soon as possible. I find content takes the longest. Once you've defined what pages are needed and you define the user flow, and you start worrying about wireframes, as soon as you have those wireframes done and you have the areas that you know you need content, I would start defining those tasks to the client or assigning those tasks to the client as soon as possible, because I always find content takes the longest out of every project. Hosting. Only thing I want to say about hosting is you have to think about the continuous users because of all of them at once. You want to make sure that your hosting has enough resources for what you're trying to accomplish. And I know this is a GoDaddy Pro event, but I actually do have customers using the larger GoDaddy hosting for LearnDash on boxes. They manage the larger boxes, and it's great. They run several sites on it. So I would avoid any lower end shared hosting for anyone. I'm not naming names just because of the intenseness of LearnDash. But anything with a little bit of power behind it, behind any host, I should have no problem. Video hosting is big. You want to make sure you're either managing that offsite. I would not recommend hosting that yourself. I would use something like Vimeo Pro or something like bunny.net. They've opened up some video hosting services. I would stay away from YouTube unless you're fine with the world seeing your content, even if it was locked down. Themes, I don't want to go too much into themes. I would pick a theme that works well, that you know, that you trust. A lot of themes, if e-learning will have built-in features. I actually use Astra myself. I used to use underscores, but I moved to Astra a couple of years ago. I would just stick to a theme that works for you, and with all your sites, learn it. I wouldn't try to jump around to the next shiniest thing. It's too much work. Find something you like that works well and stick to it. You can sell your courses. These are just a couple of the ways you can sell your courses. Find one that you like, one that makes the most sense to you, learn it, make sure you accommodate for the time and the budget. You can sell directly, through your LMS or with an add-on. Here's a couple of membership options. I personally just go with the subscriber level and use the software licensing to manage my subscribers. But membership also works well if that's something you want to do. It takes a lot more work. So I would recommend, if you were going to sell a membership site, that you would add probably about a week's worth of time to setting all that up, making sure the communications are there, the back and forth, all that stuff. Marketing, again, you don't have to worry about it right now. It's something to think about. It's something to worry about in the future. But I would pick the one that you're going to use and then work that into your game plan moving forward. And automation, if you need to have anything set up, Uncanny Automator is great for moving from one sub-site to another if you're trying to sell from a main site to a sub-site. And then Zapier works great for any type of random or catch-all automations. And these two work great for LearnDash. I didn't look into the others. I would pick whichever one that you find to be the most comfortable with. I would learn it and stick to it. Now, if we're talking LearnDash specifically, there is not built-in Beaver Builder support, but there is shortcode support. So if you like Beaver Builder, you have shortcode support that works great. There's a third-party Divi add-ons for LearnDash, but it's not a formally submitted. It's not supported by LearnDash. It's a third-party element. LearnDash does have Gutenberg and Elementor blocks built in widgets. So if you were looking for something more native, they both work well. Personally, I use Gutenberg and Elementor on all my sites, occasionally an Elementor page, but I would say 90% Gutenberg, 10% Elementor. And that Elementor is really just for like the really fancy somethings or trying to make a landing page or a funnel is when I might use Elementor. Other things to think about. Is this a new project or are you adding to an existing project? Is this a redesign? Do you have a migration plan in place? Content, student data, URL redirects, training, proper training documentation, and then live reviews, how-tos. Make sure you do any of this, and whenever you're teaching or helping your customers, make sure it's recorded, and then ongoing support. Again, these things are all going to take time. Make sure that you're adding time to your proposals to cover all these elements, because you can get to an end of a huge project, don't accommodate time for training, no one ends up using your tool, and then all that work goes for nothing. So I would highly recommend accommodating budget-wise for training. Ongoing support and maintenance. You definitely want to make sure that you have ongoing backups, uptime, all that stuff happening. I actually use GoDaddy Pro Managed WP to manage all of my sites. I manually do it. I do it a little differently. I don't fully trust machines, but I do manage and use that to leverage and speed up the process. And I think they're a great tool. I highly recommend it. Things to think about when replacing in-person classes. When we talked earlier, are you replacing groups of people, one-on-one, or work at your own pace stuff? Do you need to charge for like a booking? Do you need some type of booking system, or are you replacing the entire class where then you have to worry about enrolling groups of people? I would recommend quickly for this would be like Zoom, Google Hangouts, Meetups, Slack integration, and booking plugins. This is an entire talk on its own. We're already way over, so I don't want to go into detail on this too much. Happy to talk about this in the Facebook group or somewhere else, and happy to do an entire talk on just setting this up. But there is plugins that you can sell direct access to a Zoom link, tying that to a course through e-commerce, through WooCommerce. So it's pretty simple. You can handle it with 2 plugins, and you can be up and running if you needed something like this. So I do recommend like the Zoom integration, but again, that's going to be dependent on your laws. Make sure you're allowed to have Zoom classes if you're dealing with public school or anything like that. So we understand that's a lot to think about and take in. Key takeaways: make sure you have a clear and constant communication with your customers. Don't misunderstand the requirements and deliverables, and don't underestimate your project. And always, always provide training when you're working on something like this.
Thank you so much, James. I have a quick question. Can you throw a link to the LearnDash Facebook group in the chat for people if they want to join it and continue this conversation on there? And then let me see. We might have time for like maybe a question or two. One of the questions was, will there be a recording for this? This has been recorded. It will be up next week. So the same page that you went to register, this recording will be live there as well next week. So yes, it will be recorded. You'll be able to go back through it. We do that on the regular. In setting up a LearnDash project for a client, do you typically suggest that agencies buy the platform themselves and kind of incorporate that cost into the bill, or should they have the client buy LearnDash directly? What's your recommendation for that?
So that's a tricky one because LearnDash has unique licensing. So a lot of times I would buy developer licenses because I like to be able to use them on multiple projects and sort of like a value add to my clients. But LearnDash licensing itself states that the licenses, when bought in bulk, all have to belong to the owner of. So I know there's a couple services out there that are like we'll host your LearnDash for you, and since they provide the host and everything, the license is included. But if you were to leave that platform, you would have to re-buy your own copy of LearnDash. So that's sort of how it works. So I would say for the most part, I would recommend buying my own. When it comes to LearnDash, I believe it's recommended to the client buys it. Now, I always add a line item in my invoicing for pass-through expenses. Say like, we expect there to be maybe these are, up to you. And even if I buy them as a developer, I would still like have them pay for their portion too. So usually.
Awesome. I think we have time for like maybe one or two more. Do you recommend a specific strategy for developing courses?
So courses are a little bit tricky as well. Like I would try to like break them down as small as possible. I wouldn't, if you were making videos, I would make sure no video is really more than 15 minutes. An occasional 20-minute video maybe, but that's a lot at once. So average course videos, about 8 to 15 minutes. I would try to break it down into manageable topics and try to do one thing at a time and try to like leverage that breakdown for you. So you're really only covering one topic at a time. Those topics are inside different lessons, so you can still break it down pretty good. And I would try to I would try to make sure that everything just stayed cohesive in one thing at a time.
And then one final question, and then I think it'll be time. Do you have any tools that you have used or recommend when building courses to record your videos that might have a whiteboard as well? And if not, does LearnDash have a way, do they have like an educational system themselves so that they like teach classes on how to teach classes?
I wish, and I think, don't get me in trouble, I think I'm supposed to be doing that. I've been doing like more of the technical setup side, and I'm trying to get, I'll be doing more of that side itself. Now we do have a LearnDash YouTube channel, and there's a lot of videos there. We also have a Facebook group, and there's a pretty large community. Our Facebook group is over 20,000 strong right now, and we do make videos if anyone needs anything. We make requests. We're trying to make shorter videos now, or of smaller asks versus entire webinars. As far as how I make my videos, I actually have single Zoom meetings by myself because Zoom seems to do a really good job of compressing a large quality video, and they also have a built-in dry erase board feature. So I leverage Zoom for that and save it to my local machine when it's done. I know I could probably do a better job of editing, but I just use iMovie right now and crop out all the ums and any mess ups. So I find that editing the video though takes twice as long as recording the video.
Makes sense. Well, thank you so much. it is the top of the hour. I want to thank everyone for attending. And James, thank you so much for being here and teaching us something new. And go check out that Facebook group so you guys can continue the conversation over there. And otherwise, we will see you next week. Now, next week, we're still talking about learning, but we're not talking about learning management systems. We're actually going to be talking about Learn WordPress. And so that's going to be how you can leverage Learn WordPress, the community platform, to help educate your clients to take some of that burden off of yourself. So check us next week, same time, same place. See you guys then.
Nice. Bye.